Hi, I'm Cutroneo, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to discuss the 12th piece from Mauro Giuliani's set entitled Les Papillons, Opus 50. This piece is entitled Allegretto. If you haven't already seen my performance of this piece, you can check it out in the cards here, and there will also be a link down in the description below. Also, if you're interested in working on this piece, I have my editions available on my website. You can either get a single version, which is a clean copy of the score that you can work with, or you can purchase my edition for $2.99, which includes a fully fingered version, a version with tabs, as well as a clean version for you to put in your own markings. You can find the links to these PDFs in the description below. This is a piece that I give my students so that way we can work on bringing out a melodic line on top of a consistent arpeggio accompaniment. You can use this piece to develop the control of the right hand and bringing out different voices, as well as left hand independence with holding down certain fingers to keep the melody ringing. I give this piece to my intermediate students who have played solo pieces before, have done a lot of arpeggio and free stroke work, and can handle something a little bit more advanced where there's a melody and accompaniment with the melody in the upper voice. For my Suzuki students, this is a piece that I typically give for students that are in the middle of book 4. So let's talk about a few of the aspects of this piece that you want to focus on while working on it. The first thing is that a majority of this piece, you're actually going to keep the right hand in a fixed finger position. This is oftentimes used by folk guitarists, folk fingerstyle guitarists, where the thumb is playing the 6th, the 5th, and the 4th string, while the index finger plays the 3rd string, the middle finger plays the 2nd string, and the ring finger will play the 1st string. I call this position 0 position for the right hand. The idea is that this is sort of the home base where we make our appropriate changes. There are certain areas in the piece where this right hand will shift either up or down on the strings to allow for easier access to the notes. Those exceptions in the music, if you purchase my edition, will have the fingerings laid out as well as the position shifts laid out for you. The first exception is when you have more than one melodic note on a single string, one after another. You're just going to use regular alternation and not repeat a finger because that note is on the same string. So for example, if I was looking at the 4th measure of the piece, at the very end I have E, F, G. I will actually use alternation for those 3 notes. The G I'm going to play with my A finger, so that's the arrival on measure 5. The E I'll actually probably play either with A or M, whichever is more comfortable for you. I prefer M. And I would do M, I on the F, and then A for the G. And there are similar areas throughout the piece like that. Another example where the right hand is going to be altered is in measures 7 and 8. Now in this case, we have this arpeggio figure that now is moving to the inner strings. So at the beginning of measure 7, I'm in 0 position with this D minor chord, P-I-M. But then I get a low F sharp in the bass with my thumb. I'm actually going to play the D note in the arpeggio with I, and then the C note with A. So now I've shifted down to -1 position, where the thumb is only responsible for strings 6 and 5. Index finger plays 4, middle plays 3, ring plays 2, and if you need one, the ring finger would play 1, but in this case we don't need to worry about that. So here, that arpeggio is P-I-A. Then I'm going to play the chord in measure 8, P-I-A. And then use alternation for those 2 notes, and then thumb, 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 back down. This happens again in measure 14. But now in measure 14, we have more arpeggio-based figures, where we have thumb and index finger together in the right hand, and then M and A afterwards. Starting in the second half of measure 14, I would have, again, in -1 position, I've got P and I together on strings 6 and 4, I finger on string 3, A finger on string 2, Same thing for measure 15, P and I, M, A, P and I, M, A, all staying in 0 position. In measure 15, again the same thing, P on 5, I on 4, M on 3, A on 1, and so I'm just playing a P, I, M, A, M, I arpeggio. Now here we have in measure 17, we're actually going to move the fingers up back to 0 position. And I like to keep my thumb down on the 6th string so that way I can just feel the relationship of my hand opening up a little bit more. I bring a little bit of my arm forward, so if you watch me as I play that, arm goes forward and then back down. By knowing this kind of right hand shift, you can really develop the understanding of where that right hand has to be at any given moment in time, thus making it easier for you to play these notes and not sort of stumble over them as the right hand shifts. As I mentioned earlier, this piece is great for learning how to bring out a melodic line with a constant arpeggio. And there are 2 ways that you can do this. The first way you can do this is by using a rest stroke on the melody note. If you choose to use a rest stroke to bring out the melody, you really want to work on having the 2 notes sound together and not be slightly arpeggiated. So that's one way that you can bring out the melody. And obviously, by nature of a rest stroke, the rest stroke will be slightly louder. However, you can also bring out the melody note by giving a little bit more pressure on the string that the melody note is on. That's a little bit more complex, but I tend to like that because it keeps all of the strokes the same throughout the whole piece. And that would sound like this. Makes things sound a little bit more even, and for me, I have more control over the volume of how I want to shape that melodic line. There's no right or wrong to which one you choose, and you would benefit from practicing it both ways in developing both of those skills. With the rest strokes, again, the added challenge is making sure that the melody note sounds with the first bass note and you're not getting a slight arpeggiation. The challenge with the free strokes is that you want to make sure that the free stroke is loud enough on the melody and only on the melody, so that way you can hear it on top of the accompaniment. There are also a few left-hand challenges that this piece introduces. Probably the biggest one is in left-hand finger independence. There are passages in this piece where you're going to want to keep down a left-hand finger while the harmony and the chords are changing in the lower voices. You need to have a little bit of finger independence to control what fingers need to lift up and what fingers need to stay down. For example, in measure 5 and 6, we have a G melody that stays for 1.5 measures. And while that's happening, we have a chord change from C in the bass to G7 with a B in the bass, and then C again. And so what we want to be able to do is be able to play that chord, this chord, back to this chord. And notice that my pinky is staying down the whole time. And so a good exercise, a good way to practice that is you can take that and just practice the chords. A good way to practice that is, instead of doing it with the right hand pattern, block out the chords. And so you're going to play all 4 notes together at once. And what you're going to do is you're going to practice lifting 3 and 2 and changing the direction of the fingers and coming back. As that gets more comfortable, it will become easier for you to do that within the actual passage. Like that. That also happens in measures 13 and 14 of the piece as well. Other left-hand difficulties come up when we have sustaining chords and we want to try and keep the melody lyrical and legato while we're changing over the harmony. So what I like to do with that is I like to actually stagger the entrances of my left-hand fingers when I need the fingers to come down rather than trying to grab a full chord right away. So for example, the second phrase, which starts the pickups into measure 3. So here, I've got my third finger down, right? And I'm not going to play that note, but it's down because that's where I'm coming from. And then I want to do that, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stagger the entrances of these fingers. So now, when I go to move to the F and B, I'm bringing down 2 and 1. Now my next chord is my C chord. Altogether that chord is this. But I'm not going to put my second finger down right away. So here from the G7 chord, I put my third finger down for the C and then the second finger in the open G. Now I'm going to move to this G chord again. So if you watch those fingers together in performance, and what's really important is that we are moving our fingers and anticipating arrival of notes as we go through. A more challenging spot is towards the end, from the end of measure 14 until measure 16. I like to actually create a second, not necessarily a secondary voice, but I like to bring out the melody, and I like to have that melody connected. So the idea is that this D note, that top note of the chord, we're in measure 14, the second half. So that D note is going to C, then to B, then back to C again. And so what I'm doing, and what I try and do in the performance, is I actually want those notes to sustain out. So as I'm going from here, I want a slight little overlap. So that way it's not, there's no little hiccup between those chord changes. And it also brings, it keeps that melody going as an independent voice rather than just the top note of an arpeggio. So that whole entire example would sound like this. I'm also putting a little bit more emphasis on those melodic notes so that way they dynamically stand out compared to the arpeggio and the accompaniment figure. When I get into the C chord, I'm still hearing that B ring. In my mind, it's by the time that it gets there, you can't hear it anymore. But I'm hearing that B go to the C in my mind and keeping track of that melodic line. So really I'm thinking, and that's my melodic idea for that little section. So this piece really does have a lot that you can take from it, whether you're an intermediate player, whether it's the first time that you're playing this piece, or whether you're a more advanced player and you're looking for some easier repertoire to work on some technical challenges that you may have. This short piece really allows you to focus on 3 really great aspects of playing to help you develop and further grow as a guitarist. If you like the video, please hit the thumbs up button. Again, versions of this piece, both a free version and a paid version, are available. The links are in the description below. You can see a performance of this video, again, in the cards or in the description below. If you haven't done so already, please make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that bell notification button to be notified every time I release a video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.